When Arjun Subramaniam first sent me this book, I was absolutely delighted because one of the things we try to do at the Jaipur Literature Festival is focus on military history. My dad, I'm also a Fauji kid. My dad, Admiral Roy, wrote non-stop and wrote seminal books. And I remember when he was diagnosed with cancer and the doctors first told him, he sort of said, "Rubbish, nonsense, you don't know what you're talking about, go away." So the doctors called my brother and me, and we had to go and tell him that, no, this is what it is, you have to be treated. So he negotiated with the oncologist saying that, you have to give me another 3 years because I have this book to write, I have to go to Germany, I have to do whatever, whichever. The reason to write histories, and I know General Nanavati was very, very reluctant to share this story, and his wife is the one who really persuaded him. If we don't put down in history, in writing what's happened, you're not going to learn about what's happened in the past. These are absolutely vital stories to be shared. This is about strategy. This is about a perspective from that time. So Arjun Subramaniam, thank you so much for doing this, and congratulations.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Udayan Mitra. I'm executive publisher at HarperCollins India. The reason I'm here is that it's a great, great privilege to be publishing this book, Shooting Straight. The story of General Nanavati, who is one of the most admired military figures of our time, of his time, and for the times ahead. This is a story that people will want to read. I'm sure they will enjoy reading it. Those of you who have had a chance to pick up a copy know what I'm talking about. Written by the inimitable Arjun Subramaniam, who is, I think the foremost, I think I can say this without hesitation, the foremost military historian of our time. And it's been our privilege to have the 2-volume India's Wars from Arjun Subramaniam. And this new book, Shooting Straight, which is General Nanavati's biography, is a worthy addition to that list. We are all interested in military history. I don't think there's enough that is still published in this space. There are such fascinating stories. And General Nanavati's story is one in particular. He was a visionary leader, a very well-respected figure, and truly inspirational story. So I'm hoping people will pick up copies, read, be inspired, and I hope Arjun will take the legacy of military history narration forward. Also very thankful to Manvendra Singh Ji to come and be on the panel and to release the book. Thank you so much. Please enjoy the session. I would just like to cue the video, please.
May I start, sir? Um, it's very rare for a company commander to do a book launch of his army commander. And I earned that privilege thanks to the large heartedness of Gen Nanavati and AVM Subramaniam. And I'm honored to be here. Before I start asking questions and sharing the stage, I had a couple of anecdotes to share about Gen Nanavati. I was first introduced to him in the library of a special forces unit. Not that he was there, but there was a paper that he wrote following his stint in the UK. And the CEO of that unit gave me access to the library, one of the two units that gave me access. And he says, everything else is fine. We do tactics, we do all kinds of operations. And this was at the peak of, the beginning of the crisis in the valley. And he says, you really want to understand something about us, you better read this paper. So I read the paper written by Lieutenant Colonel Nanavati. And of course, the content got, lodged in my hard disk. But as much as the content was the handwriting. And the handwriting is something that has left a mark on me as to how could somebody write a print as good as that. And I'm glad the book refers to the quality of handwriting a number of times. And then years later, of course, I was fortunate enough to meet Gen Nanavati. And years later, I happened to be in Kabul. I don't know if General would remember this anecdote. I happened to be in Kabul as a number of MPs were invited by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Afghanistan. And unfortunately, only two of us landed up. And the ambassador, a friend of mine, he was hosting a big banquet for this delegation of MPs from India, but only two of us. And to big event, so he had the defense minister of Afghanistan as the chief guest for the banquet. And before the banquet began, he told me, he says, partner, you deal with the defense minister because I don't know the subject, you know the subject. So you handle him for the evening. And so this big, vast lawn and, India House was very nice. And so I was standing with General Vardak, Abdul Vardak, and we got talking. And then he said, I have a crazy coursemate whom I haven't been in touch with. I want to talk to. I tried to meet him when I was in Delhi, but he lives in Pune. So I said, who's the coursemate? So he said, somebody called Nanavati, Rustum Nanavati. So I said, would you like to speak to him? So he said, you know him? I said, yes, I know him. So I called Gen Nanavati. There's half an hour, I think there's a half an hour difference between Kabul and Pune. So he said, what are you doing? I said, sir, I'm in Kabul and somebody wants to speak to you. So General Vardak took my phone and went away for about 40 minutes. And I don't know what they discussed. And the then DA in Kabul came to me. He says, what have you done? So I said, why? He says, I've never seen the general look so happy. And, the general was telling me about how, as course-mates, then Major Nanavati was desperate to come back to India for the 71 war. And it's all in the book, so I won't, repeat that. So the general came back beaming after the call. And so I told him, I said, the DA has a favor to ask. So he said, whatever you want. At that time, India was making the Zaranj highway, the strategic link for Afghanistan, which people had tried to make earlier, other countries had tried, and it just failed. And BRO, Border Roads, was making the highway, and we were at the last stage. And the Taliban was shooting up every day. The Indian team, the protection team, I think that was ITBP, every day they were shooting up. And once the highway was ready and the Indian team had to depart, they would be sitting ducks for the Taliban because the distance from the ends back to Kabul or Kandahar, wherever they flew out from, would have been enormous. So I asked General Vardak, I said, DA needs a favor. He said, what? He says, he needs an airlift for the Indian team. So he said, okay, when do you want to leave? So he said, we are ready to leave. He says, okay, 3 AN-32s, day after tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., we'll be with you. Those AN-32s landed on the strip, on the highway, picked up the Indian team at 6 in the morning. Everybody's back in India without, shot being fired. And so DA, achieved his job thanks to the reference of, General Nanavati. Unfortunately, 2 months later, I think the Pakistanis must have, blown a lid. They got to know, obviously they got to know, and they bombed the embassy, and the DA lost his life with a car bomb, the suicide car bomb. That was an unfortunate casualty. I normally, in public, I don't normally refer to my father for, as a reference point, or I don't, use that. But there's an anecdote about him which is applicable to General Nanavati very sincerely. And after the second round of the Indo-US nuclear talks, a senior joint secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs said to me, he said, partner, the Foreign Service is a clique. It's like a small club. It's like a cabal, global cabal, and we recognize each other instantly, and we don't have an entry system for others. But your father's entered this cabal, this clique, because of his intellect. And I can, because of my exposure, my work, or whatever you want to call it, I can say for a fact that the special forces have brought in General Nanavati into the clique that they operate in, they live in, because of the sheer intellect that he carries and the sheer persona that he is. I can say that without hesitation. So now, with that kind of introduction, I'd like to pose the first question to General Nanavati. In the book, there are obviously various, operational matters which are of very great importance. But just from just putting the audience in perspective, you have an objective to reach, a target to reach, an assault to be completed. It's the last bit which is the most important bit. Everything else is on paper, but the last bit is what is the most important bit. And you have a paper which is referred to in the book, the last 200 yards on objective, which you wrote as a major. And I find that fascinating. If you could share a brief of that, in a sort of general sense, without having to make it too elaborate.
Yeah. I hope you can hear me now. That's a very technical question that used to bother me when I was a company commander, a major company commander in my battalion, because we in the Indian Army thought of the assault on an enemy position. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a bit technical, but if you were assaulting an enemy position, it was still the good old forming a line abreast and walking or trotting or running towards your objective with your rifle at the hip and your bayonet stuck in the front of your rifle and physically assaulting the enemy in the good old First World War and even Second World War style. And I really thought that was a lot of bunk, and we had to refine our techniques of the assault, given the weaponry we now possessed, what the enemy possessed, etc., and started giving it some thought. About the same time, in the British Army, they were talking of a different way of executing the assault. So, as one read military literature on the subject, I felt we needed to change. And I said to myself, the infantry is moving into battle and not on parade in the Republic Day. And this is how we must use ground and our weapons during the assault. And there's a cardinal principle on which the infantry exists, and that is fire and movement. So that was what I was trying to explain in that article, and willing a change, an official change in our tactical doctrine at that level.
Thank you, sir. The next question is much a larger picture, and I think everybody should be involved in it in the Q&A. And it's for both of you, actually. As the Siachen Brigade Commander, I think Brigadier Jal Masters, then Nogyal and you, three of you in succession, probably saw the worst phase of being in Siachen, and there are Siachen veterans here. Now in hindsight, with your experience over the years, what would you think is a viable, logical, and achievable Siachen settlement? And I mean it from you as a commander, and I mean it you as a combat aviator, because after all, when you enforce a peace, you need all assets, including air, land, everything. So first, General, what do you think is a viable solution to the Siachen stalemate?
I believe that the Siachen, fighting in the Siachen, which is now stopped actually, there's no fighting on the Siachen. Both armies are occupying it. And I feel the only possible solution is to convert the entire Siachen area, which is contested, into a transnational boundary area, which is governed and the responsibility of both nations, which is reasonably easily done. There are several examples of national parks which are transboundary in Europe. And if the two countries could come to that sort of an agreement, both could possibly take advantage of the kind of activity that could take place. Firstly, it's a great place for the scientific study of glaciers and glaciated terrain. Secondly, it's a tremendous area for mountaineering, which would give lots and lots of revenue to both countries. But there is a but, and that is today the solution to the Siachen problem is hostage to the resolution of the Indo-Pakistan problem, the problem of Kashmir. A trans-boundary protected area would only be possible if, for example, both nations agreed to a settlement of the Kashmir issue along what is today the ceasefire line, the CFL, and or what constitutes the boundary between our two countries today. If we could come to an agreement over Kashmir, then possibly this is a solution to the Siachen problem. But it's really, we talk of the immense sacrifice troops are making, about the immense effort that goes in. All that is true, but both countries are hanging on to their position purely because of military and national pride. That's all that there is. And it's a problem that's demanding a solution. It's all very well for political leaders in Delhi to talk about the bravery, the tremendous sacrifices that the troops are making on both sides. That's fine. But if we want a solution, there is a solution. But it is hostage to the problem between our two countries, which is Kashmir.
AVM. As an aviator, the solution as propounded by General Nanavati, suppose it required, aerial. It has to have some, obviously based on trust, but then also you keep verifying, which is the logic of military control. You trust somebody and you verify the trust being pursued. So in an aviation sense, is that enforceable?
No, absolutely not. Because if you were to, before that, I think let me do an author's duty before I answer your question, and that's in terms of a a little bit of appreciation for why the book has come out and who all have helped me write the book, right? So at the outset, I'd like to thank the Jaipur Lit Fest and Sanjoy.K.Roy for giving me a platform to showcase the book. Team HarperCollins has been fantastic on this particular journey. I'd like to thank Manvendra for agreeing to add value to the session and for unveiling the book. I'd like to thank General Manjindra for being here this afternoon. Most importantly, I'd like to thank the entire Nanavati family for supporting the book in every way. And more importantly, General and Mrs. Nanavati for being 100% committed to the book in every way and adding value in a manner that is unimaginable. General Nanavati, I've got to know him over the last 7 to 8 years. He's an outlier in every sense and an inspirational military leader. And for that privilege I will carry through for the rest of my life. Last but not the least, of course, my family, my extended family. My mother, my brother, and my daughters have been cheerleaders of my writing for a long, long time. And of course, my wife, Martika, has really borne the brunt of the hardships that we faced over the last couple of years. A very disruptive relocation, right? A new place, a family illness that required a lot of tending to. But at the same time, she's contributed immensely to the book in keeping me grounded. And when I say keeping me grounded, I must mention to you that she said that do retain your objectivity by writing the book, while writing the book, and do not get overwhelmed by the personality of General Nanavati. And that's a very, very interesting issue that she kept telling me, because when you get to know General Nanavati as well as I do, you imagine that, is this real? Or is this general for real? The kind of things that he's done, the kind of inspirational leadership that he's demonstrated, is this for real, and is it something that can be emulated? So to everyone, a big thank you. Now to your question, I think I will keep it a little simple, because I think General Nanavati has covered a lot of ground as far as the Siachen conflict is concerned. As an aviator, I don't think there is too much of a hassle about the whole Siachen issue, because, look, my position, and if I look at it from a geopolitical perspective, I think the Siachen conflict cannot be resolved until it is acknowledged that the Indian claim runs from NJ 9842 running northwards along the AGPL. Any resolution of the conflict can only come about if that sacrosanct line is accepted by the Pakistanis. Once that happens, the other issue which troubles New Delhi now, as well as army headquarters to some sense, is that though the distance from the Siachen Glacier to the Shaksgam Valley has to traverse through extremely high altitudes, but the manner in which the Chinese are attempting to shrink the access from eastern Ladakh towards Shaksgam has to be addressed from a geopolitical sense in order to arrive at a resolution of the Siachen conflict. Now, I know General Nanavati may not entirely agree with this proposition, but I've spoken to several folks, both in Delhi as well as in more informed circles, that the Chinese threat may be a bogey right now as far as connectivity between eastern Ladakh and the Shaksgam Valley. But considering the pace with which they are developing infrastructure, I think it is something that we need to be a little wary about. So the Siachen conflict, as General Nanavati has mentioned, is also held hostage to the larger Kashmir crisis. So I only hope that the idealistic solution as suggested by General Nanavati is able to be resolved in our lifetime. But otherwise, I would still remain a skeptic as far as the resolution of the Siachen conflict is concerned.
Thank you, sir. The next question is about the 11 September attacks, 2001, when you were Army Commander. I was the company commander. Just second line of the LC. I don't think India as a country as a whole, and also the military, at least not in public domain where it can be discussed, has analyzed and discussed and grasped the impact of those attacks on the Pakistan Army. Since you were Army Commander, you faced them on a daily basis across the line of control, within the valley in terms of the CI ops. After the attacks, what sense did you get about the impact on the Pakistan Army, change of posture, change of profile on the LC? How did the LC tensions escalate, de-escalate? Because subsequently it did lead to the LC ceasefire, which has helped us a lot subsequently, not immediately, but subsequently. But I just want to pick your brains because not enough has come out, or nothing has come out on that period when the impact of those attacks had on the Pakistan Army, in the northern sector.
11th of September, you
2001. 2001. The New York, the Twin Tower, and then after that was the Parliament attack. So it was just a few months. And
No.
did you sense?
You see, we were governed by very strict rules that were laid down by Army headquarters about the manner in which we dealt with the adversary, that is Pakistan, on the line of control. Those were laid down. And those persisted right till the time I took over the responsibility as the Northern Army Commander. And I felt that given our situation post the Kargil operations, there was, during the Kargil operations and post-Kargil operations, there was a revival of the insurgency in the Kashmir Valley. And Pakistan had taken good use of our distraction in Kargil, infiltrating large numbers of terrorists and fighters into Jammu and Kashmir. And I felt very strongly that we had to up the ante and to be extremely firm with the Pakistan Army on the LC. And we had to dominate the Pakistan Army on the line of control because they were assisting all the infiltration that was coming into Kashmir. They simply denied they had a hand in it, but on the ground, they provided them every form of assistance that was required by way of information, by way of all their launch pads were in Pakistani posts, and from those posts, they would infiltrate, they would provide them guides, etc., etc. So I felt, as military doctrine really requires, that you needed to dominate the enemy in order to prevent this kind of infiltration. And I think it had a very good effect. Over the years, as we went through December and we mobilized for war, this posture continued. And throughout 2001, we were constantly ensuring that we punished the Pakistani posts on the LC if there was any sign of violation of the line of control. So this was a policy, and it continued throughout Parakram. And I was often asked towards the end of Parakram, when it was clear that there was very little likelihood of us going to conventional war with Pakistan, the Chief of Army Staff often asked me whether we would like to change our policy now that tensions were easing off between the two countries. So my response continuously was that as far as I am concerned and Kashmir is concerned, there's no stoppage, and we must continue to dominate the enemy on the line of control, irrespective of what is happening elsewhere. And I said, we must continue this till the time comes, and the time will come when Pakistan will ask for a ceasefire. And indeed, about 6 months after I retired, Musharraf was the president in Pakistan, and he sought a ceasefire. Not only did he seek a ceasefire on the LC, he declared it unilaterally, which compelled the Indian government to respond. When Pakistan unilaterally declared a ceasefire on the line of control, it compelled, I think, the Indian government to respond. Otherwise, we'd have looked very foolish in the eyes of the world. But sadly, despite Northern Command continuously pushing for a declared punitive policy, our government refrained from doing so. And I think we ought to have declared a punitive policy against, in respect of Pakistan much earlier. We needed to put it down. I remember I never had the occasion to meet the National Security Advisor then. Brijesh Mishra. I never had the occasion to meet with him or deal with him, but I do remember that after I'd retired, I went to a seminar in Delhi very soon after that, and Brijesh Mishra was at the seminar, and I said to him that I've just written you a letter in my own hand because I didn't want to have it typed or anything like that, and I said that it's essential that we declare a punitive policy so that the world knows that we will exercise our right to punish Pakistan if they violate the line of control. And I remember he was most disinterested in the first place, but he said, I mean, how will it help? I said, it's necessary because the world must know that we will punish Pakistan if there is a violation of the LC. But nothing came of it, and eventually there was.
There's another interesting thing about this period in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. So before the 9/11 attacks, and I described that very, very in great detail in my book, Northern Command had prepared for a series of small assaults across the line of control to seize objectives and hold on to them at the battalion and the brigade level. And clearance for these operations almost came through from Delhi until the 9/11 attacks happened. So as a military historian, one of the things that fascinated me was this big if. And if Operation Kabaddi, as it was known, had been put into practice, I think what India would have been exposed to is the concept of limited war or limited operations, across a wide sector. Now, because we lost the opportunity to conduct limited operations across the line of control, when the Parliament attack happened, and when the entire mobilization took place as though the Indian armed forces were mobilizing for a conventional large-scale war, as a historian, I felt that we missed out on a trick or two. And I've discussed that with General Nanavati, and he's pondered over it, and he said, maybe, Arjun, you are right, but then I think the circumstances at that particular time were wrong, because I asked him a question. I said, after the Parliament attack, why didn't you ask the army chief that I've got plans ready for a series of limited attacks across the line of control? Why don't I go ahead with those plans rather than mobilizing and wasting crores of rupees for an entire mobilization that could lead to war? And I think, he didn't have an answer, because I think it didn't cross the mind of military commanders at that time that there was value in launching a series of limited attacks across the line of control.
Fair enough, sir. In the entire book, I had only one disagreement with General Nanavati, and that's on page 305, in your comments about what it takes to be an officer and a gentleman. I thought the two have to be together, to have to be complementing each other. And that's how I've grown up, being brought up and grown up. And so I had a point of disagreement there, which we may or may not get into, but I don't, I want to bring some of the audience into this discussion. If you like to refer it, if you like to answer that, you can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I was trying to say, after I finished, about the time I was retiring, I used to talk to the cadets at the IMA quite often. I've talked to them half a dozen times, I think, during my career. And I spoke to them on leadership. And, there's this concept in the Indian Army that we are, firstly in the IMA, that's the Indian Military Academy, we are not cadets, we are gentlemen cadets. So that's been the tradition. We are called gentlemen cadets, GC if you like, but essentially gentlemen cadets. The stress was on the fact that you are a gentleman and a cadet, wanting to become a military, an army officer. And I used to think in my own mind, now, what is it that defines a gentleman? Is it because he's driving a BMW or wearing a pinstripe, 3-button pinstripe suit? Is it because he's got a lot of money? Is it because he's got a nice, beautiful lady on his arm, etc., etc.? Is that a gentleman? And often talking to the cadets, I would say, look, that doesn't make you a gentleman. Some of the finest gentlemen that I've come across are Adivasis, or perhaps, say a Naga villager, etc. It's those qualities that we need to stress on, which are essential in a leader. Being truthful, for example, but all the glitz and the glamour really doesn't make you a gentleman. That's what I was trying to put across. And particularly now, because of the nature of our intake, I felt that intake into the officer cadre, I felt that this was essential. And I'm not sure I was able to put this across, because the idea of, like Manvendra said just now, exactly that it's ingrained in us that you are an officer and a gentleman. I was just trying to shift when I said what we need to put in place is the leadership. We want an officer to possess the qualities of a gentleman, an officer as a leader who possesses the essential qualities of a gentleman. That was and there were many people, most people disagreed with me, but in any case, most people disagreed with me on most things. So that was the way it was.
Thank you. There's a short bit of time left for questions. Any questions? Please be smart, because the general is very smart. Don't repeat things that have already been said. The first gentleman here. Yes, that's you.
Hello. Yeah, sorry. Extremely inspiring, sir. Thank you very much. My question is to the historian as well as to the general. As a historian, I'm sure you would want to look into the future. Do you really think wars are going to be fought in the conventional manner? And from what I heard, the last of the fighter pilots has already been commissioned, is what they say, right? And to you, General, since you've been from the last century, how do you see the next 20 to 30 years really a war happening on the ground? Surely not in the traditional manner. And are we equipped for it? Thanks.
So I think we are in a period of transition, and we are in a period which I don't think in your lifetime and my lifetime we are going to see the end of a fighter pilot. So for that I will have to disappoint you. So my breed will continue at least in my lifetime. As far as the nature of war is concerned, look at what's happening in Ukraine. That's a full-fledged conventional war that's going on. So you cannot wish away conventional conflict. So conventional large-scale conflict, to my mind, is going to coexist for the foreseeable future with limited conflicts, sectoral conflicts, and conflicts in the domains that you would suggest will gain preponderance in the decades ahead, which is space, cyber, gray zone, hybrid. These are all wonderful terms, and these are all terms that will gain traction over the years. But I'm afraid for some time in the future, we will have to reckon with both conventional conflict and new age conflict.
General, would you like to address that?
War. I think things are changing. There's no doubt about it. For countries like, say, unless you're Russia and America, etc., you're not really going to be able to mobilize your army and march into a neighboring country to capture large swathes of territory, etc., etc. I think those times are over. But the kind of gray zone warfare, I've been an advocate of this fact, and a lot of my colleagues completely disagreed with me. But I believe conflict and armed conflict of various shades will persist, as indeed it's happening around the world. I'd put it that way. Now, the trouble is with the Americans are forever changing terminology. And sadly, I think we are following suit, and we are finding it difficult to keep pace with changing terminology. When I was in service, no one spoke of gray zone warfare. Now there's this term gray zone warfare. Tomorrow it might become orange zone warfare. I don't know. So there you are.
The next one, in the front.
Thank you.
Quick, sharp one.
Yeah, it will be. So when you are posted in such unfriendly territories or in the regions, does it ever occur to you, what's the point where you are not going to grow anything, you are not going to have an industry, you can't have anything, but we are just protecting both sides and sacrificing our soldiers. So why don't we sit down and let's settle on this useless piece of land for which we are fighting, but because someone from the higher up, they want you to fight for it. So does it really, as an officer or as a commanding officer, does it really occur that it's a foolishness that we are fighting for? And let's have a serious talk with our government, with our counterpart generals on the other side, and let's do it together. Why are we wasting our time and resources on it?
I couldn't agree more with you. But the point is that as a soldier, you have no choice. I think Arjun refers to this, that this was when I went to Sri Lanka, and I spent time in Sri Lanka with the best combat units of the Indian Army. 1, 9, and 10 para commando. Those were the 3 units I spent time with in Sri Lanka. And I think General Dalveer is sitting here. He's one of the bravest warriors. Dalveer, please stand up. Please, let them see you. He is one of the greatest warriors I have ever had the privilege to serve with. But I had to tell his boys that, look, no discussion of why we are here in Sri Lanka. What are we doing? There will be no talk. We are here to do a job. You are the best units in the Indian Army. You have to set the example. This is exactly what I told them. And let's not discuss whether it is right for us to be here, wrong for us to be here. It's not for us to question why. You know the old poem. So that's how it is. So I agree with you. We have to settle these differences. There's no doubt about it. But it's not for soldiers. It's for the wiser men. It's for Manvendra and so.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, one of the backbenchers. Yeah, the back. More determined. I know, she's a
Sir, I have served with you as a young officer in Siachen, a young captain, and subsequently when you were the co-commander. You were inspiring, but more than that, you were true to form. One of the few people whom I've seen who've always stayed consistent. I have two quick questions for you. The first being that while there is so much of hunger for military literature in the Indian context, there's woefully very little written about. Why are we still so hesitant of coming out and speaking when we know it will cause or it will impact positively when everything else seems to be going wrong? And second is a little personal question. Today, in hindsight, you've spoken about it a little while ago. How would you have dealt with Siachen and Op Make Do today with all the insights that you've got? How would you operationally deal with it as a brigade commander? So,
I think today with this, let me take the second part first. Today with the ceasefire holding on, if there's any place where it's holding, it's along the so-called AGPL. And there's no shooting across the AGPL, which is a good thing. But look at the effort. Look at the 3.5 men that are sitting on Bana top. The weather plays the same kind of tricks. Snow and ice play the same kind of tricks. All of that, and they're there, and they're doing nothing. They're just occupying ground. So I feel that there has to be, and it's only where your political leadership can't, if the political leadership is constantly talking of our Jawans and how brave they are and how much they are, but it is really meaningless. I agree with you entirely there. And the first point, what was the first half? Why isn't there? It's because, but you're now making a difference, aren't you? People like you are writing. I mean, he's writing now. And but I think we are afraid. Firstly, the rules and regulations are such that perhaps are inhibiting. And we don't really pay attention to perhaps keeping our archives and ensuring our archival material is stored and stowed away. All that is lacking. So I think we need to pay much greater attention to this and encourage people to write. I agree with you. Can I take just a second? Just a second.
Of course.
Just very quickly, I want to thank Manvendra Singh Ji for really chairing this discussion. I've known him and we've been friends, but I'm very grateful he found the time to come and chair this session. I want to thank the Army Commander for being here. He's got a very busy schedule, and the fact that he's here with his family, I'm very grateful. I want to thank my family, my sister-in-law, Geeti Singh, her husband, Ravi Singh, who's the CEO of WWF, and I think is very well known in this part of the world. I want to thank my cousin, who's come with my sister from Bombay and Pune. Her father fought in North Africa and was taken prisoner by the German army, spent many months in a prison camp in Italy, escaped from the camp as the Indian 8th Indian Division fought through Italy. My sister, who's been the most excited of all in the family about this book. So she's here. And I want to thank my sons who've come all the way. My elder son, Rushad, for just 2 days. He goes back today, back to Amsterdam where he works. And my younger son, who's come for a week, all the way from America. And above all, I want to thank my wife. She's been a soldier's wife. I don't think she understood, she believed truly what she was in for, and I didn't help her, but she accepted the fact that for a soldier, duty comes first, above even the family. And that was something that she understood perfectly well. And she was both mom and dad to the boys for 50% of our life, married life together. So that's the way it's been. Thank you all.